Hello, and welcome to One Spark Stories, the podcast where innovators, creators, and some unsuspecting risk takers share about navigating highs and lows, laughter and tears, and how sometimes all it takes is one spark of inspiration to find your way to happiness. This podcast will leave you inspired to take action on your own purpose as we connect, create, and celebrate unique sparks around the globe, once again proving that it is a small world after all. Now, I don't know if it's because we were both Disney College Program alum or just the fact that Dan Cockerell is one of the most genuinely kind people I have had the privilege of meeting and talking to. But this was one of those conversations where all of a sudden I look at the clock and realize, oh my gosh, so much time had passed up, but we were just so involved in the conversation. So I am incredibly grateful to have you a part of this today, to hear his words of wisdom and really his experiences over his 26 years with the Disney company and what led to that spark of inspiration that led he and his wife Valerie to make that decision to move away from their longtime careers and take an adventure and go out into their own consulting and speaking work. So this will take you through all 19 positions Dan held during his career. The amount of opportunities in the organization are endless, and they really do help bring multiple perspectives. While I could ramble on and on about the conversation, let's just get to it. So without further ado, it's Dan Cockerell. Hello, Dan Cockerell. How are you?
Hey, Katie, how are you this morning?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm ready to hear a little bit more about you. I feel very fortunate that we had some time recently to chat, get to know a bit about Dan and Valerie Cockerell, but today we're going to dig deeper. How are you feeling about that?
I'm ready to go. I love talking. So let's do this.
That's important when you're in like a consulting and speaking role. Otherwise, we'd have real problems. And
when you're a speaker, you better speak.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like, I like to talk. So this is a great way to talk with people, and whether anybody listens or not, so be it. I get to talk.
We still had a conversation.
Right. Exactly. And it's going to spark some ideas for both of us, I'm sure. Well, then I'm going to start with a few questions to just get the brain going. With your history within the Disney organization, there are an abundance of destinations, but what destination or park would best describe Dan Cockerell? Which destination meets the energy of Dan Cockerell?
Yeah, well, the park I think that the whole family is connected to is Epcot. That was, and if I know a lot of your listeners have been to Epcot, but if they haven't, the front of the park is Future World, and the back of the park, which I call the heart and soul of Epcot, is World Showcase. And so a little history, if you go back in time, originally Walt Disney, his vision was to create a city where people live and work and play. And it was called Epcot, Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. And as time went on, I think they concluded that they weren't going to be able to get there. You could say that, Celebration was a planned community later on, but he had a very specific design for Epcot. It was bringing in big companies, corporations that where people would work. And a part of this also was this idea of international, connecting the world and connecting different cultures. So eventually, Walt died before Magic Kingdom opened, and Epcot ended up getting built opened in 82. And so this idea of let's bring countries from all over the world to this one place around a lagoon. And the architecture is going to be from those countries, the products, the food, the employees are going to be from those countries, which was a pretty radical idea back in the early 80s. And so they started to recruit, and they went to all these different countries, 10 different countries, if you don't count the United States, and found companies and restaurants and retailers, because a lot of the World Showcase pavilion retail and food and beverage locations aren't even run by Disney. They're partners because they're so authentic in how they deliver that. In fact, Mitsukoshi, who runs the Japanese pavilion, they opened their first department store in the 1400s in Tokyo, and they've been around ever since. So they have some staying power. So they run that, and there's no way Disney could copy that authenticity. So anyway, the bottom line is, because Epcot was built, my wife, Valerie, got recommended by one of her English teachers when she was in France about this program that Disney had in this place called World Showcase, where she could go to United States, Florida for a year and work at the French Pavilion and meet Americans and meet people from all over the world and represent her country. And she did that. And then when I left Disney back in, when I left Boston University, graduated, I went down to Disney. My first job was at Epcot parking cars. And then eventually, when I went to France for 5 years and came back, my job was as an operations manager at the American Adventure and Japanese pavilions. And so if you fast forward, Valerie worked there for the Millennium Celebration and retail. My dad was with Disney for a long time, so he was very knowledgeable about Epcot. I opened Test Track at Epcot. I ran a lot of the Future World areas. Both our sons were waiters at the French Pavilion in college. And then our daughter worked in horticulture and did a lot of work at Epcot. So we've all been there, and there's just a lot of family history. And once again, the world is such a cool place. And I think it's such a genius idea, because most Americans, just culturally, and the fact when you have your own continent as a country, you're much less likely to travel the world. It's not a judgment on whether people are interested in the world or not. It's just most Americans are not going to leave the United States. So they get exposed to, and they get to meet people from these countries. And I think it inspires a lot of kids. You make up these things in your mind about what countries are about. When you get to meet people from those countries, it interests them to go to these places or travel, or realize maybe one of your stereotypes wasn't right. And now that you know someone from this country, you've changed your opinion. So I think it's just such a cool place. One last story. There was always a story that never happened, I don't think, but someone talked about it, that one day there's going to be two countries that are at odds and trying to figure it out, maybe on the brink of war. And both of the presidents would have been roommates at Vistaway and have worked at Epcot in two of the different pavilions. And maybe that's how peace is resolved, because, all these internationals live with each other also while they're living here. So out of everything that Disney has done, for me, that seems to be the most inspirational, and probably, fits kind of how we see the world. Is it's just there's some great people in this world. It's a big place. There's so much to learn.
Yeah. And exactly to your point, that the United States has so many different cultures and landscapes and areas within it that it's almost hard for some people to imagine traveling beyond and experiencing the world. And so Epcot did a fantastic job of bringing that, a little dose of international experience to people. So while it's become known for eating and drinking around the world, which, who's not going to delight in a cuisine or cocktail here and there,
sure,
it's been very powerful in opening the eyes, taking away the assumptions about places and allowing firsthand experience with the cultures. So I think that's fantastic that that's what brought you and Valerie together. It's where the family has come and experienced. And it's not just the acronym that every paycheck comes on Thursday, because it's so much more than that.
Absolutely.
It is so much more than that. Well, then I don't want to be so, I don't want to assume that your favorite childhood toy was a globe because of that worldly piece. But what was it? What, as a kid, kept you curious and excited and engaged in play?
Boy, kept me engaged in play.
You're a rugby guy. Was it probably like a rugby ball? What were we playing with then?
No, I mean, I was, once again, I grew up, I was born in 1969. So when growing up, there was, a lot has happened since then, I guess I'll say. So we used to play, I can remember back when I was in first grade, we used to play, the game was called Army, and you had a wooden rifle, or you had a stick that was a gun, and you'd run around in the neighborhood. The rule was, if you saw somebody and said bang, they had to fall down for like 30 seconds and then lay there until 30 seconds was up, then they could get up again and go back to war. So that was like, I don't know, this is ingrained in the DNA of kids. So a lot of this play was just freedom. It was going out and getting to run around and go climb trees and, go walk 3 miles and go to the ice cream shop. I remember the places we went. And I mean, when I lived in Chicago, I think we were in 2nd or 3rd grade. We'd ride our bikes to the bowling alley and we would bowl. And then we'd take the sheet of paper up to the desk and ask the guy to score it. We didn't know how to score in bowling. We just knew how to bowl. We didn't even know how to bowl. But I just look back on that. That was so cool. And it seems today trying to give kids that freedom to go explore. But, the world has changed a lot. But for me, it was having to use my imagination. And I think that's, I'm not going to say, that's what's missing today because, the world evolves and keeps moving forward. But this idea that you had to go out and figure stuff out was pretty cool. And I can't imagine if I had a lot of the stuff today. I think kids today, I see how much they know, how much sooner. It's amazing what they know about. Yeah. I think it's just important. We help kids. Just because they're smart doesn't mean they've matured. And so you got to be careful that, like I said, just because they know the answers to these questions you didn't know till you were 15 and they're 8 doesn't mean necessarily they're mentally and psychologically mature. So we just got to keep that in mind and protect them and keep talking to them about the world. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but keep making sure they understand the basis of what life has to give and what values are and that kind of thing. And I think all the stuff they have at their disposal today is fantastic. You just have to manage it.
Yeah. And it's teaching the ability to filter through that everybody can connect around the world. It's funny thinking about Epcot. This is one of my core memories as a kid in Spaceship Earth, when you would ride back and you would see the family communicating with another family around the world. And that seemed so far-fetched. And
Right.
Yet here we are living it now. And while it's rewarding, to your point, sometimes it's easy to just assume that that's what it is, that picture on the other screen defines all. And so reminding everybody, kids and adults alike, filter and research and understand. And believe it or not, Dan and I were once children and we were once teens and we once didn't believe that our elders were onto something. But once you've lived and seen, it's important to listen to people and embrace that you have the power to connect, but you also have the power to control what you internalize and what you put back out there. So that's where I think, it definitely needs a reminder for all of us. So then as an adult, how do you think, have you been engaged? Experiential learning is something I remember from my time with Walt Disney Company and working as in the college program. They really did a good job of teaching the value of experiential learning, getting out and experiencing things firsthand. Their tours are often built on that. Go out and experience the ride, and then we'll talk about it. So have you been able to see in any companies, especially in the consulting work you do now, a great example of allowing that innovation or imagination to come to life in the workplace? Because I think we've hit a wall with innovation as adults once we've been trained and educated and we've been given systems. Have you seen examples of that?
Yeah, not enough. Definitely not enough. The one I do remember, there's 2 things that I recall specifically that I think are great. One is at Google, and I'm not, like I said, things change. I don't know if they have this policy still, but I think at Google at one point they said, you can spend 20% of your time on projects that have nothing to do with your job. They just said you can go out and look at other things if you have ideas. And I love that idea, that concept that if I had 20% of my time and said, you know what, I'll do my job and 20% I get to choose, that's a pretty powerful thing. And I'll probably Google that after this podcast and see where they are with that and what ideas came out of that. But when you give people the freedom to go chase stuff that their boss isn't telling them they have to do, or the company's not saying is part of its, 5 goals for the year, you stumble onto things that are really valuable and powerful. So that's one they did. I know that, universities they have the concept of letting professors go off for a year on sabbatical and spend time on sabbatical. Now that's a university educational concept, but I love that concept. I assume maybe there's some companies in the world doing that. That's a big commitment because you got to still pay people, but the long-term value of letting people get out of their normal environment and go do other things and come back, I think is such a powerful thing. But you have to have a long-term vision. And if you're focused on the dollars and cents every quarter, you're probably not going to go there. And then the other thing, to a smaller degree, Walt Disney Imagineering, I think they still have that program. They allow Imagineers, they give them a stipend, I think a couple $1,000s a year that they can use just to go learn a new skill or maybe get better at something, take a photography class, take a design class, go travel somewhere, do an architectural tour. They decide how to spend the money, but it has to be something on continuous improvement. So I think those are some things that are out there. And there's, in my mind, every company can do this. I don't care what company you run. If you run a restaurant and you tell your servers, you know what, once a year, I'm going to give you a coupon and you can come to our restaurant with your family or friends up to 4 people and dine here and give us feedback on how the experience was. You can do that. Or, you know what, I'm going to give everyone in my organization $30 a month to go spend on on something online. And I'm making all this up, but if you can encourage that, it doesn't necessarily have to be a big financial impact. If you can just tell your staff now to tell them the people who are going to get developed and figure this out, they're going to do it whether you offer it or not, because those are the people with the attitude. They're going to figure out a way. And this was something we always struggled with at Disney when we did these developmental things, when we did classes and all this. Should we make them mandatory or not? Now, sending someone mandatorily to go ahead and learn something is not the best way to learn. And we said, well, you know what, if we don't offer this, the people who have a great attitude and are looking to develop themselves, they'll figure it out, even if we don't offer it. So what's the added value to this? So we had to thread that needle and make sure everyone, and I got to a point, I don't know if the company did, but I said, you know what, development is your responsibility. This is not voluntary. If you're going to work here, you need to develop yourself. And so we're going to have you go to these classes, and I'm going to test for knowledge. I'm going to test for understanding. And you need to go and you need to learn and you need to implement these things. And I think a lot of times people see development as this nice to have this, once again, I feel like being developed or not. And I tell people, if you have a company and you want people to continue to learn and develop, make it mandatory, hold them accountable, and tell them that's part of working here. You got to get better and you have to learn new things. And people may disagree with that, but I think it's a great way to get people's attention and say, look, if you're going to be successful as a company, everyone needs to be innovating and everyone needs to be learning all the time.
And I think development can be personal. It can be professional. It's just that state of continuous learning, because I know from my experience in some positions, when I was in education, we would be trained on best practice. Well, best practice was one way of doing over and over and over. It didn't really evolve. It didn't teach that opportunity to develop new ideas or develop a voice. And so I think balancing innovative approaches, balancing what is necessary within alignment of your organizational purpose. Is it a new vendor? Is it a new resource? There's certainly intentional there, but also empowering the drive for development. Many people maybe won't want to, but how can you help them see the value of it? So yeah, I think it's very important to instill that love of lifelong learning. We get so bogged down and tired of being told what to do. Well, let's flip the script and say, hey, learning can actually be pretty cool. It's a pretty resourceful tool. So definitely harnessing that. I want to go back to the early years of Dan as the college program cast member. As you mentioned, your dad was with the company. And so, there's certainly the Cockerell name, but you started in the parking lot, not sleeping. You were at Vista Way, which may or may not be debatable as equivalent accommodations. But as a fellow Vista Way college program person, I have strong appreciation. Would you say that early time working, what some may seem as the low job on the totem pole, Was that something that you look back at and think, that really set me up, or this was kind of a weird, ridiculous transition into a large organization?
Yeah, I mean, you've hit a point that I'm really passionate about is experiences, diverse experiences. And for me, that's the key to life. That's the key to, in my opinion, happiness in life, learning, creating opportunities, is getting experiences. Because short term, all experiences are not great experiences. You can have really bad experiences, but long term, they're all positive because they help you learn. I've had jobs that, I said I worked at an investment bank in college for a summer, and I was able to cross that off my list. I didn't know what it'd be like to work there. I worked there. I got through the summer. I learned a lot and said, you know what? I don't want to be in this kind of environment. This is not what gets me excited. And so I knew what I did not want to do, which was pretty important to get that out of the way. Yeah, it was powerful. And, working in college on weekends, waiting tables, and then, working at Disney, I discovered that I started to discover I liked structured environments. Now, when I was in college, I didn't know I liked structured environments. I just knew that I liked being at Disney, which is a very structured environment. And I worked at Marriott when I was in Boston at a bar waiting tables. I like the structure at Marriott. They train you well. They have a very precise way they do things. I loved interacting with people. I love serving. I loved helping people. So through those experiences, it helped me realize that's where I should be. And I was really lucky at a very, pretty young age to understand that that's the place I wanted to be. And I didn't have to get out of college and then spend the next 10 years going to different companies to try to figure out what I wanted to do. Now, I clearly didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I loved being in those kind of environments. So for me, it was a no-brainer after I graduated, get back to Disney somehow, because that's going to be a place that I thrived last time. And I knew I thrived there because I'd been in jobs where I didn't thrive, and I knew what that felt like. Sometimes when you're good at something and you're in a place you like being, you don't realize it unless you have something to compare it against. Yeah. And you don't realize how great it is. And so that was key. Absolutely. That was key to me figuring out my next steps. Now, the next step wasn't, I'm going to go do this college program job, and that's going to turn into a full-time job, and that's going to turn into a 26-year career. That was never on my mind. Life doesn't work that way, but it clearly felt like I was in a place that I worked hard, and it seemed like when I worked really hard, I got results and I was successful and I was rewarded for what I did. So, and I couldn't have done that in just any company, because there's certain things I was good at and certain things I wasn't good at. And I was very lucky to align myself in an organization that valued what I valued. And I think that's one of the keys to success. You just can't go out and go anywhere. You have to be in a place that you're going to be able to be yourself, work hard being yourself. And if it's aligned with the company you're working for, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And you can tell when it's not in alignment. It's so funny how I feel that parallel in the story, because I started working at Hollywood Studios, renting strollers at Oscar's service center right there, right at the front. And so, the idea of, okay, you took an internship to tow ECVs that died back at the Lights Motor Action Show. That doesn't sound very impactful to your career. When in reality, I look back at that as being, I was the first and or last interaction that guests had that day at the park. For many of them, they would come in and I could help set the stage for, a successful day, help guide that. Or as they were exiting the park, I could help make sure that whatever seemed to be weighing on their mind that didn't go well, how could I reframe it? How could I make sure that we could walk out even with a little sticker to put a smile on a sad, tired kid's face? What could be fixed? And so as I went through my career, which nowadays I like to look at it as very non-linear. It sounds much classier than I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but I was chasing that level of purpose. And I think that when you start in an organization that, as you said, is structured and is very defined in their values, very defined in what the purpose is, and then you start to go places where it's not, you notice it and you feel it, because the employees are not as engaged. Customers may not even want to come back. They will let you know how they feel. And I began my career chasing this purpose. How can I connect with that feeling again? So for me, it's been connecting with groups like what you've got with the Perch Group, and finding other professionals that are feeling this sense of loss and detachment. So for you, was there a point in your career where you connected with somebody? And even if it was you're 17 at Disney, you were in the company, there's so many roles, but were there ever connections or groups that you were a part of that made you go, I got it again. This is the connection that's going to keep me inspired each day to keep moving forward. Would you say you've had some of those in your career professional pathway?
Yeah, I don't, it's funny. I can't remember a moment that did that, but I think the challenges that you have when you work in hospitality, every day when I went in, it's that I look back now realizing how lucky I was. I always had some butterflies in my stomach. So I'm like, boy, I'm going in today and I'm going to be, I'm a manager at the bakery, the cable car bakery at Disneyland Paris on Main Street. It's going to be a big day. Are we staffed okay today? What's the attendance going to be like? Is the product going to be there? Are we going to make our goals? Are we going to take care of everybody? And every day I went in, that was so much fun to know I'm going in today and there's this big, massive thing I got to get right in the middle of and start making decisions and start assisting, start asking for advice from people, making the call. And so it seemed like every day it reinforced my purpose. That doesn't mean every day was great. It were just bad days. I didn't get enough sleep last night. I'm worried about something personal and I got to go in and compartmentalize that and be on, because the guests don't care what's going on with you. They pay a lot of money to show up. You got to be on your game.
They don't care that it was Pleasure Island night the night before and you were out too late with your friends. They don't care.
They don't care. Exactly. And the employees don't care either. You're supposed to be there and have a lot of energy, be a role model for them. And so you carry that on your shoulders. And that just that was fun to me. It was always, I'm not going to say it was always like Christmas morning, but you never knew what you were going to get. I was in guest relations, what's today going to be like? What's up, the gates open, here come the guests. Let's get this rolling. How are we going to manage through the day? And every job I had was like that. It's like, you never knew what was going to happen. So on one hand, that reinforced my purpose all the time. And then, the employees you met were so passionate about what they did. That was something I got used to over time, that I just thought every employee's like that. A lot of people at Disney are really all in. They really love. And that's the hard part of this, having a clear purpose. There's peer pressure all the time to perform and step up. Yeah. And when you fall behind, it's much harder. When I worked in parking, I would much rather my boss come out and coach me on something I wasn't doing than my peer parking cast members. That was the worst. When if you're not pulling your weight, that was kind of shameful. It's like, okay, I got to be on my game here, and because I'm messing this up for everybody. But I don't think I had a moment where it just sort of reinforced my purpose. Every day I went in, and it made a lot of sense to me that, this is where I should be. This is what I should be doing. Maybe this job I'm in, I've done this now for a couple of years. Maybe it's time to look for the next learning experience and go do something else. But for 26 years, it never was on my mind to go and do anything else, because it just made sense. And probably towards the end of my career at Disney, I had gotten older, our kids gotten older. My wife and I were looking at each other saying, are we going to keep going down this path, or are we going to go do something differently? And I just consider leaving Disney and becoming a consultant and speaker my 20th job. I had 19 jobs at Disney. This was my 20th job. It just happened not be with Disney anymore. So that was hard, because a lot of times when you find something that's great, it's hard to, step away from it, but you got to recognize that nothing should be forever, and change is good. And it took me that long to get to a point where, my next move is probably not going to be, it's probably going to get me further away from my purpose than I want it to be. Because I want to be hands-on and be with people and talking directly to people. And that was going to change if I didn't make a decision. And so that kind of drove me to say, that's time to make a change here. I was doing a podcast yesterday. We were talking about the term status quo. And boy, status quo is such a powerful anchor. People are in status quo and they're like, status quo is good. I'm safe. It's, I don't want anything to happen. If you're in a good position when status quo is, you're not really interested in changing the environment, changing the dynamic, because you're in a good place. And so sometimes if people have enough courage to be able to challenge their own status quo, which is really hard, and sometimes the status quo gets changed for you. Pandemics, wars, economic events, and then people are they're either their status quo is interrupted, or the risk of staying in the status quo is way riskier than taking a risk. And when that happens, I see so many people, a year, 2, 3 years later, say, wow, I'm so glad that happened. I never would have tried this. I never would have done this if I wasn't forced to. And so the question is, are you going to wait for an emergency, a crisis to go try something? Or are you going to walk away from something that's perfectly good and try something? And that's not logical. It's not intuitive to do that. But a lot of times that's what it's going to take for people to really get to where they're going to be happy. And I've talked to lots of employees and leaders and companies. They say, my management doesn't listen, and they don't follow through. And they have all these things. I said, well, look, as soon as the pain of that becomes bigger than your ability to do the job, it's time to leave. But remember, these jobs, there's a lot of stuff you're not going to like about your job. And that's just par for the course. Okay. If you like more than you don't like, you probably have a great job. And that's part of the deal. But that status quo piece is a big one. And, most people won't take that leap. We did, because it was, our kids were growing up. A lot of times it's not responsible to do that. You got kids, you got to take care of and do this. When you take a risk, you got to think about what's at stake, and they're going to be at stake also. They're going to be at risk, but you can get to a point sometimes you go, okay, what's really the risk at this point? Well, the risk is this doesn't work out. I got to go get a job. Okay, we can do that. And let's go look at something different.
Yeah, that is part of the challenge and innovation that I for a long time, I wondered why it was so hard for people to challenge the status quo or unlearn these systems and find new ways of thought. And I realized that for many people, that status quo is comfortable. They're learning and developing based on what the status quo for their profession or their need is, not to really take that intentional risk. And let's see, I was in high school for Columbine and 9/11. I was graduating then. My husband and I got married and had our first child during the financial crisis in late 2000. Let's see, that was going 2008, 2009 into our early career. We qualified for government assistance, even though I had a master's degree and he was new in an electrician union, but we had to figure it out. And then a couple years later, got this job working. I was RIFT, reduction in force, because of the way. And so I was forced to pivot again. And so while I would often get frustrated, like, why are people so risk adverse? I realized because they haven't been forced into situations where everything has flipped. Now, the last 2 years totally happened to everybody, gave everybody a rude awakening. And so now it's kind of shaking it off and saying, well, where do we go from here? Which is when I think it's great that leaders like yourself and, as I get out to more companies, can say, hey, I've taken this risk and it's scary, but I promise you there is a huge reward on the other side of it. So I want to get into more of the work you're doing now, but I just have to, we're going to run through a real quick list because people know you as Dan Cockerell. You're that Disney guy, you worked at Magic Kingdom, but what's funny is when people talk about, oh, I worked for Disney, they don't realize that you're not just working one role. Even in my time there, I did pin trading, I did merchandise, I did all kinds of stuff. In your years, can you run through and rattle off, maybe not even in order, all the different roles you had? Because I think it'll open eyes to what it actually means to be a Disney cast member and how diverse your experiences are.
Yeah. So, okay, here we go. College program. I worked at the front desk at the Contemporary Resort. My first full-time job in 91, I was parking cars and driving trams at Epcot in the front entrance operation. Then I got trained as a ticket seller. And then I went to Disneyland Paris. I opened the parking lot in Disneyland Paris in April 92. Then I went to ticketing for a year. Then I went to guest relations as a manager for a year. Then I went to human resources for a year. And then I went to food and beverage for a year. And then we left France. I came back to United States. Valor and I did with our son, Julian. I was the operations manager at the American Adventure and the Japanese pavilions. And then eventually I got responsibility in addition for the Italian and German pavilions there. I then went to the test track, open test track, and ran test track and outdoor food and the west side, no, the east side of the park, Future World. Then I went to Future World Center, which is Spaceship Earth and Electric Umbrella, if you remember that, and all those retail and food and beverage locations at Epcot. At that point, I went back and started my MBA program. I did that over 2.5 years at night. Did the program. Then from Epcot, I went to the All-Star Resort, All-Star Movies, and became the front desk manager and ran housekeeping for that 2,000 room piece of the hotel. From there, I got promoted 2 years later and became the general manager of the Wilderness Lodge and the Fort Wilderness Campground. I did that for 2 years. Then I went back to the All-Star and became the general manager of the All-Star for 2 years. Which was in 6,000 rooms in total. From there, I left and became the general manager of merchandise at the Magic Kingdom for 1.5 years. And then I became the general manager of operations at the Magic Kingdom for 1.5 years. And then in 2009, I got promoted to become the vice president of Epcot. I did that for 2 years. Then I went to Disney's Hollywood Studios as the VP for 4 years. And then I went to the Magic Kingdom for 3 years. And till 2018 was the vice president there, and then became the co-owner of Cockerell Consulting.
And there you have it. I'm trying to process and picture, first of all the costumes you wore over the years, because that had to be quite eclectic. But that's, I mean, truly, you've been in the food and beverage, the retail side. There are so many aspects that the career transitioned with. And how many roles and years it was before you took that first management promotion. I think we forget, and going back to the conversation about, the younger kids, I tell you, they don't often realize that not only is it important to get that time in, and, it does take a few years, it's possible to have it expedited, but it brings you so much more awareness. And I wouldn't doubt that all of those different roles are what helped you lean into the work that you're doing with your consulting. So you and Valerie made this decision. Hey, it's time. Let's do this. Let's go all into our consulting. What was the heart and the drive and the purpose behind moving forward with your work?
Yeah, well, in 2017, I remember walking in the door from work and Valerie said, "Are you still enjoying your job?" And I said, "Of course I am." She goes, "I don't know. There's not the skip in your step you used to have." And I didn't recognize that. Yeah, I lost my spark. And I didn't want to face that. Status quo is good. There's no way. So for a year, we talked about it. And I saw maybe I'm not enjoying as much as what I did. And it wasn't a matter of, what was changing. Was the company changing? Was I changing? It didn't matter. It just felt everything. And it didn't feel it. And so I started to think about it. And, my dad had left Disney in 2006. He became a consultant. I talked to him. He's like, "You could easily do this. You'll love it. You'll learn a lot, become an entrepreneur." And the thing that put me over the finish line was Valerie saying, "Hey, look, let's just go for it. If it doesn't work out, you can always get a job." So this was a team effort. And she was getting her to lean in and say, "This was okay. Let's try it." Was for me, I'm like, I'm in. So once again, terrifying decision, so scary to make this move. And so we made the jump. And then from there, it was like, okay, let's start learning about what we need to know and what we need to do. How do you start your own business? Okay, we need to create a website. How do we do that? Podcast. People need to know I'm out here. So how do we do that? I need people to, I'm going to become a keynote speaker. Now, on a side note, the good news is I'd volunteered in 1997 to become a keynote speaker for the Disney Institute. Just in the back of my mind, I wanted to become a good speaker, and I thought this may serve me well in the future. So for over 20 years, I was speaking, every few months at Disney Institute, practicing. So that really helped a lot. And then when I made the jump, it's this is the hardest part about entrepreneurship is when you're out doing this is who's going to hire you? How do people know you're there? People don't stumble across our web page and just say, oh, here's a random guy, let's hire him. It's always contacts, someone who knows someone. And so I didn't have a whole bunch of external contacts because you're pretty insulated at Disney. You don't deal with a lot of quote unquote outside people, but it started to happen. And I knew someone who used to work at Marriott, who now worked in Croatia and was looking for someone to help them with their hotel company. And then someone else called and said, hey, I heard you left Disney. Here's somebody. And then just a few years ago, a gentleman hired us from an accounting firm. He was at the Magic Kingdom, but like back in, 2014, he saw my picture in the tunnel of the Magic Kingdom, and it said, kind of call me if you need anything. And he took a picture of that, which you're not allowed to do, but he took a picture of it. And 4 years later, he called me and said, I saw you left Disney and I'd love you to see if you want to work with our company. And so, once again, these are all random connections. And that's how we got things rolling. So if you're thinking about going to become an entrepreneur, think about all the connections you have, and then you need to generate new connections. And LinkedIn is great. You start to meet people. But what I've discovered with all the social media is you can't just go out and start asking people to hire you. You have to establish relationships and provide value. So, for example, Val and I, we're doing one workshop in Australia in November. And I started to reach out to tons of people on LinkedIn in Australia and say, hey, I'm going to be down there. I'd love to, buy you a beer. We're going to host some receptions, and we're not selling anything. We just want to meet people and set it up for future. And I think a lot of people say, well, I don't have time to do that. It's like, well, you better have time, because that's what it takes. And so the other thing is you have to have a clear message. And so what is it you do? What is it you have that people want to hear about? And for me, it's culture. The book I wrote is How's the Culture in Your Kingdom? Disney's known for his culture, creating great culture. So that's something we really honed in on. And hey, there's my book, Katie.
Hey.
Yeah, very nice. So that's what we're doing now. And so, organizations that just want to get nothing we tell anyone is proprietary or confidential. It's like everyone knows this. We just put it in a very common sense standpoint and just reminding people success is based on very basic principles. There are no magic solutions. It's just hard work and focus and consistency. And a lot of people want to hear something else. Yeah. I want to take the blue pill, or I want to, get the magical solution. Give me the software program that's going to just make me be successful. And that doesn't exist, unfortunately. So that's why these get rich quick schemes and these weight loss schemes are around. They're going to be around for years because everyone wants to believe there's another way. And when it comes to sort of, providing value, running your business, having a happy life, a lot of it is about just every day getting up and going after it.
Yeah, absolutely. And those quick fixes are not going to build that relationship, because at the bottom, at the core of all of it, every relationship matters. Every connection matters, because had you not given that person the time of day, or if they had seen your picture in the tunnel and thought, oh, that guy he totally blew me off the one time I had a question, that's now your reputation. And so acknowledging every single person, not knowing what they're bringing that day, and respecting that it might not be their best day, but tomorrow maybe. And so acknowledge it and own it. I want to, before we move into just celebrating some things with your business, with the consulting work, something I've talked about with people is, and it was just a conversation this weekend, the idea of imposter syndrome. Now, when you first left Disney, you left this large organization, this, pretty heavy title, and you shifted into a role. So at a glance, it's like, oh man, Dan, he's got the title, he's got the background, everybody's going to want him. Did you feel like that gave you a lot of, momentum? Or what could you recommend to people that feel like, man, I don't have Dan's credentials, and now he's popping up on LinkedIn and everybody's going to flock to him? What was your experience with that?
Yeah, you need to, we all have self-doubts. That's absolutely true. And I think a big part of that is it's a lifelong journey to get your head around that, because your mind will make up things. We are trained from an evolutionary standpoint to assume danger, assume negative, because that's how you survive. There's a cave. In that cave, there may be warmth and food, or there may be a bear. And every human is trained to say, you know what, there's probably a bear, so let's not go in that cave. So you're always doubting yourself. You're doubting, how you're going to get through things. And there gets to a point where you just got to say, you know what, I'm done with that. I'm going to step up and do what I do. And I don't care what title you have or what you've done. If you don't have some self-doubt, there's a problem, because you're setting yourself up for failure. And so I would tell you, if you're out there and it's these credentials, that only gets people's attention. That only opens a door. And once the door's open, you got to be able to add value. They don't care what you did after that. They don't care what your title is. Are you going to tell me something's going to help me? Are you going to inspire me? Can you speak? What is it you can do? So you got to figure out, what is it that you do well? I was just, once again, yesterday, I did a few podcasts yesterday. I was talking to Melinda Santiago, and single mom, 4 kids, and she had all kinds of different jobs. And she ends up now, she went to law school, and she runs an entertainment company, and she manages careers for, celebrities and bands. And, I was like, well, what qualifies you to do that? She said, I'm great at listening, and people trust me, and I really come at it from an interest in their success. I was like, wow, there's something that's novel. So you got to go out and do what you do and focus on the passion of you adding value. It's not about what you want. We all go out in the world and we say, this is what we want. No one cares about what you want. It's what can you do to help others? And if you keep focusing on that, helping, putting your foot forward, not expecting something back every time you do something, doors will start opening. But people, I know they can sense that. They can sense whether you're real or not. And you just have to have the confidence to know, you know what, I'm good at this. I know how to do this. You just got to figure it is. What is it do you have to offer? You got something to offer, because there's a bunch of people out there that have bigger problems than you do, and you can solve those. You got to figure out, what is it that you can go talk to people about and tell them, you have a problem, and here's how I can help solve it. And then you may have to do that for free for a while until you prove that. And once you get them recommending to others, things start to take off again. But yeah, obviously having, Disney in the title is great. But once again, that simply opens the door. After the door's open, it's a matter of, okay, now how do I go ahead and actually add value? So I would not be, if I was out there trying to figure this out today, you cannot be timid. You got to step up. You got to go ask friends and family and coworkers and people, hey, can you connect me? Do you know someone who may want me to help out and do something for them? And if you aren't willing to take that risk and have people tell you, heck no, I don't have time for this. That's it. When I'm on LinkedIn talking to people, hey, I'm Dan, I worked at Disney and here's what I've done. I'm not interested. Disconnect with me. Never call me again. I could take that person and go, okay, no problem. I'll do that. But first, I'd love to send you my book. Okay, I'll take the book, but then disconnect. And maybe I'll send that book. Maybe they'll call me in a year and go, you know what? I was having a bad day. I read your book. Come on over. I think we could work together. So you just have to have this faith and this blind optimism a lot of times that things are going to work out. And it's hard to do that. And it's hard to say, man, do people know that I'm just, but you got to keep moving forward. It's easy to give up. It's really hard to keep moving forward and being positive and saying, this is going to work out, and finding new ways to do things and pivoting and thinking about different approaches. But that's what people who are successful in life do. They never give up. They keep moving forward. They keep looking for solutions. And the cool thing about it is, it's like when you make 20 bets, often only one bet has to pay off and you're back where you needed to be. But the 19 others you may not get, but that one is going to give you momentum, and it's going to open 5 more doors.
Yep, absolutely. That's perfectly said. And something that at the most shallow, Katie, that I could bring right now, I think it's also important for people to remember that we all have seen people in leadership roles that lead with a title and they can't back it up. And so unfortunately, they're out there and they'll have that front and center, but authenticity will always shine through. And so to what you said, keep on keeping on. So I want to make sure we celebrate something about Dan Cockerell that we have not yet, which we've touched on the book. You've got your consulting, you've got an incredible wife, Valerie, your kids, everything seems to be rock solid moving forward. What is something we haven't tapped into that we could celebrate about Dan Cockerell?
Boy. No one's ever done that one. There's, I mean, my first reaction is I'm not here to be celebrated. So, don't celebrate about me. I think, and here's the thing. We have a family, we have dynamics like every other family. So I think the big thing is to know, when you and your spouse work together, you have bad days, you have disagreements. When you have kids and they don't return your texts and you call them and you go, hey, what's the deal? Why aren't you calling me back? So I think it's important to know, maybe to celebrate. We got the same issues. We work through the same things. We got the same problems everyone else does. And we're always trying to figure those out. And no one's life is perfect. And if you talk to anyone who represents and says everything is great, it's not, because that's not real life. And I don't care how much money people have. People say, well, if you have enough money, you don't have to deal with all that stuff. Sometimes you have to deal with more of that stuff. Or if you have this certain job, you don't have the problems other people have. As I get older, I realize there's a bunch of things that money and success cannot fix. They can't fix your relationships with your family. They can't fix your health. There's a bunch of stuff they don't. And every day morning I get up, I'm trying to prioritize. Do I run today? Do I get work done? Or I'm running behind? I'm not pulling my weight. I got to make sure I call that person back. So I think the big thing is just to know we're all out there trying to figure this out, and don't let social media fool you. We're all dealing with something. We're all figuring something out, and our life is not nearly as good as you think it is. And that's important, because I think we all feel like we're on an island, and why can't I be like everyone else and have what they have? Well, they don't have that. They're just representing the positives, because that's what we do in America. How you doing today? I'm great. No, you're not. You got a bunch of problems. As my dad said, it's the biggest lie in America. So just know that, get up every day and go just know, as my grandfather left me a quote. He was a retired admiral in the Navy. And he said, you do your best and then you forgive yourself. And that's all you can do, because we have days where we have self-doubts, we fail, we don't do what we want to do, we don't treat people like we should. And you just got to, you do your best. Sometimes your best is going to be miserably failing. And then the next day you forgive yourself and you go back at it.
I think that's perfectly said. Well, I celebrate your vulnerability and your openness to others, because that is something that has been really enjoyable for myself. And I know many others that have been part of the community that you have started, where we can connect, we can create, and we can celebrate. In fact, today, I think we're celebrating wins for people. So thank you for finding ways to continue to celebrate people, because we don't acknowledge our own wins, even when it's in the state that today I won this argument with my spouse. No, it's not quite that.
That's right.
But thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate your time. Where could people connect with you? It sounds like LinkedIn's a great spot.
LinkedIn's great. CockerellConsulting.com. You can email us. Our cell phone numbers are on there. And if you ever want to connect, just text, call, email, LinkedIn, whatever you want to do. We're pretty accessible. Ski
slopes, airplanes. It sounds like anywhere in the world you all are going to be traveling, and
as long as there's cellular or Wi-Fi, we're ready to respond.
It's perfect. Well, thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate it. And people can also listen to you a little bit more on your podcast, Come Rain or Shine.
That's right. Come Rain or Shine. We just hit 200 episodes. So check that out. We have some pretty cool guests there.
Very cool. Thank you, Dan. Well,
thanks, Katie.
See you real soon. I want to extend a sincere thank you again to Dan for not just his time, but for his genuine leadership in both the conversation and throughout his time at Disney. I have been able to connect with quite a few people that have worked with him while he was there, and every single one of them says the same, that he had a vision, he had a plan, he knew the work had to be done, but he was very much people first. One of my favorite little side notes is on a cruise that we were on back in March. I was sitting with Dan before a show and we were talking and just talking about speaking and consulting work and navigating it as a new entrepreneur. And what was amazing to me was not just the time that he gave, but when I returned home just a couple days later, I received a package in the mail, and it was a book that he sent me based on our conversation that has been spot on to what I needed to break through the mental barrier I was at that point. So again, thank you, Dan, for continuing to lead by example and make sure that everybody else is set up to be their best self as well. As always, make sure to share this episode with a friend that may really be able to gain some insight and impact from it. Rate, review, leave us some love, and make sure to be well, stay curious, and we'll see you real soon.
Did you know that Epcot has 11,391 parking spaces? That's more than your driveway.
Later, Tater.